Francis Collins wrote a letter in October 2020 to Anthony Fauci, and I think somebody else. I have the letter. Oh, it's not a letter, email. I apologize. Hi, Tony and Cliff, cgbdeclaration.org. This proposal, this is the Great Barrington Declaration that you're a co-author on. This proposal from the 3 fringe epidemiologists who met with the secretary seemed to be getting a lot of attention, and even a co-signature from Nobel Prize winner Mike Levitt at Stanford. There needs to be a quick and devastating published takedown of its premises. I don't see anything like that online yet. Is it underway? ? Francis Collins, director of the NIH. Somebody I talked to on this podcast recently. Okay. A million questions I want to ask. But first, how did that make you feel when you first saw this email come to light? When did it come to light?
This week, actually, I think, or last week.
Okay. So this is because of freedom of information.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, sort of maybe because I do want to add positive stuff on the side of Francis here. Boy, when I see stuff like that, I wonder if all my emails leaked. How much embarrassing stuff. Like, I think I'm a good person, but I haven't read my old emails. Maybe I'm pretty sure sometimes later I could be an asshole.
Well, I mean, look, he's a Christian and I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to forgive, right? I mean, I think he was looking at this Great Barrington Declaration as a political problem to be solved, as opposed to a serious alternative approach to the epidemic.
So maybe we'll talk about it in more detail, but just for in case people are not familiar, Great Barrington Declaration was a document that you co-authored that basically argues against this idea of lockdown as a solution to COVID, and you propose another solution that we'll talk about. But the point is, it's not that dramatic of a document. It is just a document that criticizes one policy solution that was proposed.
But it was the policy solution that had been put forward by Dr. Collins and by Tony Fauci and a few other scientists. I think a relatively small number of scientists and epidemiologists in charge of the advice given to governments worldwide. And it was a challenge to that policy that said that, look, there is an alternate path, that the path we've chosen, this path of lockdown with an aim to suppress the virus to zero effectively, I mean, that was unstated, cannot work and is causing catastrophic harm to large numbers of poor and vulnerable people worldwide. We put this out in October 4th, I think, of 2020, and it went viral. I mean, I've never actually been involved with anything like this, where I just put the document on the web and tens of thousands of doctors signed on, hundreds of thousands of regular people signed on. It really struck a chord of people, because I think even by October of 2020, people had this sense that there was something really wrong with the COVID policy that we've been following. And they were looking for reasonable people to give an alternative. I mean, we're not arguing that COVID isn't a serious thing. I mean, it is a very serious thing. This is why we had a policy that aimed at addressing it. We were saying that the policy we're following is not the right one. So how does a democratic government deal with that challenge? So to me, that, you asked me how I felt. I was actually, frankly, I suspected there had been some email exchanges like that, not necessarily from Francis Collins, around the government around this time. I mean, I felt the full brunt of a propaganda campaign almost immediately after we published it, where newspapers mischaracterized it in the same way over and over and over again, and sought to characterize me as sort of a marginal fringe figure or whatnot. And Sunetra Gupta, Martin Kulldorff, or the tens of thousands of other people that signed it. I felt the brunt of that all year long. So to see this in black and white, with the handwriting essentially of, the metaphorical handwriting of Francis Collins, was actually, frankly, a disappointment, because I've looked up to him for years.
Yeah, I've looked up to him as well. I look for the best in people, and I still look up to them. What troubles me is several things. The reason I said about the asshole emails that I send late at night is I can understand this email. It's fear, it's panic, not being sure. The three fringe epidemiologists.
Plus Mike Levitt, who won a Nobel Prize. I mean,
but using fringe, maybe in my private thoughts, I have said things like that about others, like a little bit too unkind. Like you don't really mean it. Now, add to that, he recently, this week or whatever, doubled down on the fringe. This is really troubling to me. That, like, I can excuse this email, but the arrogance there, Francis, honestly, I mean, broke my heart a little bit there. This was an opportunity to, like, especially at this stage, to say, just like I told him, to say I was wrong to use those words in that email. I was wrong to not be open to ideas. I still believe that this is not actually argue with the proposal, with the policy, the proposed solution. Also, the devastating takedown. As you say, somebody who's sitting on billions of dollars that they're giving to scientists, some of whom are often not their best human beings because they're fighting with each other over money, not being cognizant of the fact that you're challenging the integrity, you're corrupting the integrity of scientists by allocating them money. You're now playing with that by saying devastating takedown. Where do you think the published takedown will come from? It will come from those scientists to whom you're giving money. What kind of example would they give to the academic community that thrives on freedom? Like this is, I believe Francis Collins is a great man. One of the things I was troubled by is the negative response to him from people that don't understand the positive impact that NIH has had on society, how many people it's helped. But this is exactly so he's not just a scientist. He's not just a bureaucrat who distributes money. He's also a scientific leader that in difficult times we live in is supposed to inspire us with trust, with love, with the freedom of thought. He's supposed to, those fringe epidemiologists, those are the heroes of science. When you look at the long arc of history, we love those people. We love ideas, even when they get proven wrong.
That's what always attracted me to science. Like somebody, the lone voice saying, "Oh no, the moon of Jupiter does move." Yeah. I mean, but the funny thing is, Galileo was saying something truly revolutionary. We were saying that what we proposed in the Great Barrington Declaration was actually just the old pandemic plan. It wasn't anything really fundamentally novel. In fact, there were plans like this that lockdown scientists had written in late February, early March of 2020. So we were not saying anything radical. We were just calling for a debate, effectively, over the existing lockdown policy. And this is a disappointment, a really, truly a big disappointment, because by doing this, you were absolutely right, Lex. He sent a signal to so many other scientists to just stay silent, even if you had reservations.
Yeah. Devastating takedown. The people, how many people wrote to me privately, like Stanford, MIT, how amazing the conversation with Francis Collins was. There's a kind of admiration because, okay, how do I put it? A lot of people get into science because they want to help the world. They get excited by the ideas, and they really are working hard to help in whatever the discipline is. And then there is sources of funding which help you do help at a larger scale. So you admire the people that are distributing the money because they're often, at least on the surface, are really also good people. Oftentimes they're great scientists. So like It's amazing. That's why I'm sort of like sometimes people from outside think academia is broken some kind of way. No, it's a beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing, and that's why it's so deeply heartbreaking where this person is. I don't think this is malevolence. I think he's just incompetence at communication.
Well,
Twice.
I think there's also arrogance at the bottom of it too.
Yes,
So like,
but
you
all
know,
of us have arrogance at
yes,
the
but
bottom.
there's a particular kind of arrogance, right? So here it's of the same kind of arrogance that you see when Tony Fauci gets on TV and says that that if you criticize me, you're not simply criticizing a man, you're criticizing science itself.
Right.
Right? That is at the heart also of this email. This certainty that the policies that they were recommending, Collins and Fauci were recommending to the president of the United States were right. Not just right, but right so far right that any challenge whatsoever to it is dangerous. And I think that is really the heart of that email. It's this idea that my position is unchallengeable. Now, to be as charitable as I can be to this, you know, I believe they thought that. I believe some of them still think that there was only one true policy possible in response to COVID. Every other policy was immoral. And if you come from that position, then you write an email like that. You go on TV, you say effectively "La science c'est moi," right? I mean that is what happens when you have this sort of unchallengeable arrogance that the policy you're following is correct. I mean, when we wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, what I was hoping for was a discussion about how to protect the vulnerable. I mean, that was the key idea to me in the whole thing, was better protection of the older population who were really at really serious risk if infected with COVID. And we had been doing a very poor job, I thought, to date in many places in protecting the vulnerable. And what I wanted was a discussion by local public health about better methods, better policies to protect the vulnerable. So when we were met with instead a series of essentially propagandist lies about it. So for instance, I kept hearing from reporters in those days, why do you want to let the virus rip? Let it rip, let it rip. The words "let it rip" does not appear in the Great Barrington Declaration. The goal isn't to let the virus rip. The goal is to protect the vulnerable, to let society go, as you know, open schools and do other things that it function as best it can in the midst of a terrible pandemic. Yes, but not let the virus rip, where the most vulnerable aren't protected. The goal was to protect the vulnerable. So why let it rip? Because it was a propaganda term to hit the fear centers of people's brains. Oh, these people are immoral. They just want to let the virus go through society and hurt everybody. That was the idea. It was a way to preclude a discussion and preclude a debate about the existing policy.
So I've this is an app called Clubhouse. I've gone back on it recently to practice Russian, unrelated, for a few big Russian conversations coming up. Anyway, it's a great way to talk to regular people in Russian. But I also I was nervous. I was preparing for a Pfizer CEO conversation, and there was a vaccine room, and so I joined it. And it was a pro science room. As these are like scientists that were calling each other pro science. The whole thing was like theater to me. I mean, I haven't thoroughly researched, but looking at the resume, they were like pretty solid researchers and doctors, and they were mocking everybody who was at all. I mean, it doesn't matter what they stood for, but they were just mocking people, and the arrogance was overwhelming. I had to shut off because I couldn't handle that human beings can be like this to each other. And then I went back just to double check. Is this really happening? How many people are here? Is this theater? And then I asked to come on stage on Clubhouse to make a couple comments. And then as I open my mouth, I say, "Thank you so much. You know, this is a great room." Sort of the usual civil politeness, all that kind of stuff. And I said, "I'm worried that the kind of arrogance with which things are being discussed here will further divide us, not unite us." And before I said even the unite us, further divide us, I was thrown off stage. Now, this isn't where I mentioned platform, but like I am like Lex Friedman, MIT, also, which is something those people seem to sometimes care about, the followers and stuff like that. Like, did you just do that? And then they said, enough of that nonsense. Enough of that nonsense. They said to me, enough of that nonsense. Somebody who is obviously interviewed Francis Collins, is the Pfizer CEO.
You're bringing on fringe epidemiologists also. So just
yeah, exactly. But this broke my heart, the arrogance. And this is echoes of that arrogance is something you see in this email. And I really would love to, we have a million things to talk about, to try to figure out how can we find a path forward.
I think a lot of the problems we've seen in the discussion over COVID, especially in the scientific community, there's two ways to look at science. I think that have been competing with each other for a while now. One way, and this is the way that I view science and why I've always found it so attractive, is an invitation to a structured discussion where the discussion is tempered by evidence, by data, by reasoning and logic, right? So it's a dialectical process where if I believe A and you believe B, well, we talk about it, we come up with an experiment that distinguishes between the two, and while B turns out to be right, I'm all frustrated, but I buy you dinner and I say no, C, and then we go on from there, right?
Yep.
That's what science is at its best. It's this process of using data in discussion. It's a human activity, right? To learn, to have the truth unfold itself before us. On the other hand, there's another way that people have used science or thought about science as truth in and of itself, right? This, like, if it's science, therefore it's true automatically. And well, what does the science say to do? Well, the science never says to do anything. The science says, here's what's true. And then we have to apply our human values to say, okay, well, if we do this, well, then this is likely to happen. That's what the science says. If we do that, then that is likely to happen. Well, we'd rather have this than that, right? But it doesn't. Science doesn't tell us that we'd rather have this than that. It's our human values that tell us that we'd rather have this than that. Science plays a role, but it's not the only thing. It's not the only role. It's like it helps us understand the constraints we face, but it doesn't tell us what to do in face of those constraints.
But underneath it, at the individual level, at the institutional level, it seems like arrogance is really destructive. So the flip side of that, the productive thing is humility. So sort of always not being sure that you're right. This is actually kind of Stuart Russell talks about this for AI research. How do you make sure that AI, super intelligent AI, doesn't destroy us? You built in a sort of module within it that it always doubts its actions. Like, it's not sure. Like, I know it says I'm supposed to destroy all humans, but maybe I'm wrong. And that maybe I'm wrong is essential for progress, for actually doing in the long arc of history better. Not the perfect thing, but better and better and better and better. I mean, the question I have here for you is this email so clearly captures some maybe echo, but maybe a core to the problem. Do you put responsibility of this email, of the shortcomings and failures, on individuals or institutions? Is this Francis Collins, Anthony?
No, this is an institutional failure, right? So the NIH, so I've had 2 decades of NIH funding. I've sat on NIH review panels. The purpose of the NIH is what you said earlier, Lex. The purpose of the NIH is to support the work of scientists. To some extent, it's also to help scientists, to direct scientists to work on things that are very important for public health, or for the health of the public. And the way you do that is you say, okay, we're going to put $50 million on the research in Alzheimer's disease this year, or $70 million on HIV, or whatever it is, right? That pot of money, then scientists compete with each other for the best ideas to use it to address that problem. So it's essentially an endeavor to support the work of scientists. It is not in and of itself a policy organ. It doesn't say what public health policy should be. For that, you have the CDC. And what happened during the pandemic is that people in the NIH were called upon to contribute to public health policy making.
Mhm.
And that created the conflict of interest you see in that email, right? So now you have the head of the NIH in effect saying to all scientists, you must agree with me in the policy that I've recommended, or else you're a fringe. That is a deep conflict of interest. It's deep because first he's conflicted. He has this dual role as the head of the NIH, supporter of scientific funding, and then also inappropriately called to set or help set pandemic policy. That should never have happened. There should be a bright line between those two roles.
Let me ask you about just Francis Collins. I don't know if you, I had a chance to talk to him on a podcast. I don't know if you maybe by chance gotten a chance to hear a few
I heard
words.
some of it. Yeah.
Well, I have a kind of a question to that because a lot of people wrote to me quite negative things about Francis Collins. And like I said, I still believe he's a great man, a great scientist. One of the things when I talked to him off mic about the vaccine, the excitement he had about when we were recollecting when they first gotten an inkling that it's actually going to be possible to get a vaccine. Just, he wasn't messaging, just in the private of our own conversation, he was really excited. And why was he excited? Because he gets to help a lot of people. This is a man that really wants to help people. And there could be some institutional self-delusion, the arrogance, all those kinds of things that lead to this kind of email. But ultimately, the goal is, this is what, I don't think people quite realize this. The reason he would call you a fringe epidemiologist, the reason there needs to be a devastating published takedown, he, I believe, really believes that it could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of burden to carry on his shoulders because, like you said, in his role where he defines some of the public policy, like, you know, depending on how he thinks about the world, millions of people could die because of one decision he make.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of burden to walk with.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I don't think that he has bad intentions. I think that he was basically put or maybe put himself in a position where this kind of conflict of interest was going to create this kind of a reaction.
Yeah.
Right. The kind of humility that you're calling for is almost impossible when you have that dual role. You shouldn't have as funder of science and also setter of scientific policy.
I agree with everything you just said except the last part. The humility is almost impossible. Humility is always difficult. I think there's a huge incentive for humility in that position. Now look at history. Great leaders that have humility are popular as hell. So if you like being popular, if you like having impact, legacy, these descendants of apes seem to care about legacy, especially as they get older in these high positions. Like, I think the incentive for humility is pretty high.
Well, I mean, the thing is like there's a lot that he has to be proud of in his career.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Human Genome Project wouldn't have happened without him. And he is a great man and a great scientist. But it is tragic to me that his career has ended in this particular way.